Welcome to Expats On Air. This is a show where expats talk. I'm your host, Nathan. And we're introducing Elliott Zaagman. How you doing, man?
Good. How you doing, man?
Did I say your name right, by the way?
Yeah, you said it perfectly right. Yeah, a lot of people say Zaagman, but you said Zaagman, which is, Zaagman may be like how Dutch people say it, because that's where kind of my ancestral homeland is, but in America we say Zaagman, so it's good.
Zaagman.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm from Michigan, so it's Zaagman.
Zaagman. Yeah. All right, perfect.
Yeah, you got to make it nasally.
Where in Michigan are you from?
I'm from West Michigan, just outside of Grand Rapids, or spent my life in and around Grand Rapids, or my childhood, I guess. So that's the second largest city in Michigan. It's towards the west side of the state, known for things like Amway, and what else? President Gerald R. Ford is from there. But yeah, it's a pretty it's a nice town. It's a good place to be from, but maybe not a great place to live, especially with the snow. That's for sure.
Okay, so your Michigan heritage aside, can you introduce yourself, what you do? You have a podcast. Maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah. So I'm originally from Michigan, but I've spent most of my life living abroad. Most of my adult life, actually, I've spent living in China, in Beijing. I've worked mostly focused on China's tech sector in a number of different ways, in HR, in PR, research communications, in journalism to some degree. And right now what I do, in addition to a number of other things, is I host a podcast called the China Tech Investor Podcast, which is powered by a platform called TechNode. And what we do is we kind of scrutinize overseas listed Chinese tech firms, both the good ones and the not so good ones, and try to kind of separate the two from each other. But for the last 3 years, I have not been living in China, and before COVID, I would come back to China quite often, but I've been based in Bangkok, Thailand, which I have to say, in the middle of December right now, when it is a nice, about 25 degrees Celsius or 80 degrees Fahrenheit outside, I'd say it's a pleasant alternative to Beijing, that's for sure, or Grand Rapids.
Do you think in Celsius?
Initially, I think in Celsius, or I think in Fahrenheit, right? So like, if I was thinking it's 80 degrees outside, but I have an inhibition to, and I'm drinking a beer right now. I have not lowered my inhibitions enough, but I have an inhibition to say, okay, don't say Fahrenheit, say Celsius instead. So that's kind of what's going on in my psyche with that, or in my head.
You don't like to just force Fahrenheit on people?
No. I mean, like, also because most of the world doesn't go by Fahrenheit, so I don't. It's not like English, right? You can expect people to speak English, I think, because that's kind of a globally accepted norm in international environment. But Canadians go by Celsius, Europeans go by Celsius, Australians, New Zealanders, they go by Celsius. So I kind of feel like that's kind of something that it's just for Americans. So I probably should comply with the global standard on that one.
Okay, you don't like to just say it's 80 degrees, bitch. Learn Fahrenheit. I was just thinking about this morning because I'm in Texas and it's cold here. It's really cold right now. It was 38 degrees Fahrenheit when I was leaving the house.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, so I'm sitting in my car.
That means the middle of the day.
Sorry, go ahead.
The middle of the day is nice jacket weather, though. The middle of the day is nice jacket weather, though.
Yeah.
That's what's nice.
That's
Is that
true. That is true. But yeah, the nights get
like you
cold,
can't
the
wear a
mornings are
jacket here?
cold. And I forgot what I was going to say. But anyway, we were talking about Fahrenheit, but we
Fahrenheit.
should be going back to the China Tech Investor podcast. So I listened to a little bit last night.
Yep.
I listened to you guys trash Suning. You're talking about how shit their stock was right now.
Well, James was looking into Suning, my co-host. He's
Right.
he's more professional than I am. I don't have the same kind of financial background he does, but I'm very interested in these companies. So that's kind of the dynamic.
So what's your specialty on the show? If he's the finance guy, what are you?
So I'm a little bit more of the generalist for one thing. Like, so there's a few things. One is that I've worked for a long time in for and around these Chinese tech companies, either as a consultant for them or as a journalist or whatnot. So I know a lot of the folks in and around them. So I know a little bit more of the kind of personal side of things. I obviously lived in China for a long time. And also, I myself am a retail investor. I like to buy stocks and to invest my money into stocks. And and I have a business background, but not so much in the finance side of things. So I also kind of play the role of the listener, right? Where maybe they might not have all the details, but maybe they read a few articles and they want to know more. So when we have a guest, who I usually also book the guest as well, then I can kind of play the role of the curious person who knows some or knows something, but doesn't know everything and wants to know more from the expert.
Okay, cool. And what got you started doing PR and that kind of stuff for some of these Chinese tech companies?
Well, a lot of it was just one thing that I really liked about China is so the first time that I ever came to China was right after I graduated from college in my undergrad in 2008, and I came in and I taught English for a year, and then went back, got a master's degree, and then ended up looking for opportunities, and was like, well, there are some in China, so I went back and I started I ended up on a sales team for a large British company that had a lot of educational subsidiaries in China, and they had we did their business to business sales. I was one of the few foreigners on their team. There were just two of us and about a dozen or more Chinese folks, and just kind of I got used to kind of the hustle life there, kind of being on a sales team and with a bunch of folks who are just kind of like looking for opportunities, and that's kind of how stuff turned out. So where you go somewhere for work, but then you also learn, okay, well, there's all these other opportunities too. So by the time that I was there for a few years, you have a few side gigs going, or you have a few things that you're interested in. You're meeting people for lunch, and you're kind of getting the lay of the land. And then after a few years, my colleague and we kind of started our own firm, and we just kind of took it from there. So essentially, the way that I got into just about everything in China was just saying yes and giving effort. So someone would, usually a Chinese friend or colleague or whatnot, would come up to me and say, hey, do you know how to do this? And I'd say, well, I can either do it or find somebody who knows how to do it. And just kind of gave effort and gave curiosity. And that's kind of, how I ended up where I ended up, and that was especially for my time in China, it worked out quite well, so I'm quite happy with it.
So do you put things in your Twitter bio like certified hustler, things like that, just to let people know where you came from?
No, I fucking hate that shit. Like that's the thing, is that I hate the whole idea of the whole Gary V hustle thing. Like I can't. And I also don't really hustle as much anymore. Like I still will it's still the same kind of ethos. It's just that, circumstances have changed a little bit, mostly for the better. But I can take things a little bit slower now, so which is nice. Both because of, the reason why I'm in Thailand is actually because my wife, who we lived together in China for a long time, but she ended up getting a promotion with her work down here, So after kind of spending so much of my 20s grinding out in Beijing, working 80 hours a week, now I can kind of be a little bit more of a normal person and and kind of relax a little bit and go into things that kind of maybe are interesting to me, but might not, occupy all of my time and resources and things like that.
Is that a common difference for somebody working in China as an expat versus Thailand?
This is my experience, but like everyone's experience is different, right? So I came to China when I was young and in my 20s, and like I was hungry and I wanted to like I wanted to make some money and I wanted to like get somewhere in my career and I wanted to to do things. So spending 7 years, I guess at that point, yeah, from the time that I had a couple of stints there, but yeah, you know, you, I think that Beijing, especially Shanghai, I think too, that there is just at least when I was there, very much this attitude and environment. Okay, what's the next thing? Like, just work and grind and chase where the money is going, and look for opportunities. And there's very much a culture that just really fosters that there, and that's what I really enjoyed. But at the same time, it's not something that is entirely sustainable to just live your life that way. It's kind of like how New York is, I think, for a lot of people, where it can be really exciting and it can be really really fun, but the longer you're doing it, it's just like at some point, the reward is not there as much anymore, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think that was what I loved about China, I think, and I still love it about China, and that's why I used to go back there all the time, because I could still kind of experience a lot of that. But Bangkok is a lot slower. It's still a big city, so there's still a good amount of that, but it's not the same kind of I definitely don't have the same sort of pursue like the next dollar at all costs approach that I used to, which is a very good thing, and I'm very happy that I'm at that point.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, are you able to talk about what your wife does, or do you want to keep that private?
I probably shouldn't talk too much. I mean, she works for I guess I could say like a large international organization, I would say.
Okay.
But that's about it. But yeah, but she's like, I think the way that things often work, like, is that I think for both of us actually, like, going to China was a big stepping stone. And I think part of that is like understandably being kind of like you're like of white American, and you kind of understand maybe some of the kind of standards or expectations for some of these international companies that are there, or international organizations, and maybe some of you can kind of fit into some of the culture there. But I think for both of us, getting there, we were fairly, I think, in college, we were pretty average people, and then but going to China, like, just the ability to be able to work and to be able to like give effort and to get opportunity was something that I think really benefited both of us and has continued to benefit both of us, because it offered, I think, certain kind of ladders that I don't think I would have been able to go up, in the United States, or for her as well. Just some career opportunities that just we're there because of the dynamism, and also because of, I think, in some ways, because of our own comparative privilege there. But yeah, I mean, I think that was a big move for both of us, and I think it's a huge factor in our own success, and allowing us to kind of achieve what we wanted to achieve, and have a good life so far.
Yeah, I would say being an expat in China, if you are meeting the right people and working really hard, like in 2-3 years, you can really accelerate your career a lot.
Yeah. And just finding, like, to me, a lot of it was just saying yes to everything. like just it didn't matter what it was, just being, unless it was a really shitty like gig or something that like crossed the line, just being like, oh yeah, sure, like I'll always take a meeting, like I'll always, if there's a spot in my schedule, I'll fill it up, and I think that's something we both did, and that was, like I said earlier, you can't do it your whole life. It's going to burn you out. But I think from my 20s, I think China was just such a great place to be, because when you have that energy, when you have that hunger, and I mean also as well, like China just fascinated me. Like I've always wanted, I still study Chinese and try to improve my Chinese. But the history, the culture, just kind of the significance of China on the global stage really has, has and continues to attract me to that country.
So saying yes all the time, but you said that maybe if they did cross the line, you wouldn't. But what does that mean? Like, what are some of the times they cross the line? What did they want you to do?
Like, I think some of it is, like, to me, it's like a lot of, I mean, some of it is just like, if they don't pay enough money. But others, I think, was like, if you have to, to me, it would be if I had to put my own name on the line for something that I knew was probably not true. And this is something that is kind of particularly important in things like communications, PR or sales, where that maybe there's an opportunity with a company where they want you to put your own face and your own, they want to say, Elliott Zaagman says this about this company. And that's something that I've often struggled with. Just because if I can't vouch for, the entire like legitimacy of a brand or a company or what I would be saying, that's something that I struggle with, I think. But hopefully, yeah, that's because I think that ultimately all you have is, especially in communications or journalism or anything like that, or if you run a podcast, really the only thing you have is your credibility. And if you are willing to kind of give that away, then it's not very good for your long-term prospects, in my view.
Cool. So we talked before in this sort of interview format. It wasn't a podcast. You shared some things that you probably don't want to say on a podcast recording. I don't know if you remember what we talked about, but we got into a lot of kind of funny stories about some of the companies we've worked with in China. Is there anything you can share on that front, though? Some interesting, quirky stories where Chinese companies asked you to do something maybe unusual.
Well, I've had a number of different times where, like, I've been asked kind of randomly to, go and be the rental laowai. Like, and some of it's fine, so for those who don't know what we're talking about, basically being like the white person that shows up to give credibility at a business meeting or at a product launch or something like that. But so folks that have lived in China might be familiar with this. You get a message saying, okay, so and so will pay you a certain amount of money to show up to this meeting or show up to this event and pretend to work for this company. And I should say I've done a few of those before in my younger years, right? Where I think there was one where it was actually like, and this is something that I actually probably regret. But I was younger, and it was kind of at this point in my life where I was just like, okay, well, I'll say yes, 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 it was an architectural firm, and they were making a pitch to another. I think it was a foreign affiliated architectural firm making a pitch to a Chinese company, and they needed a foreigner in the room, so they asked me, and I went, and that was something that's probably maybe a little too, because something that I might not feel comfortable with, kind of in hindsight, but yeah, like just this, like, that's probably the easiest thing to reference. Is just kind of the rent a laowai or rent a foreigner experiences. But I think a lot of, especially in the tech industry, when I was there, for especially during periods like 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, it was this huge boom period. And everyone was scrambling for cash, and there was just it was like you see the same kind of characteristics in things like the dot-com bubble or whatever, where if someone's willing to invest, the idea is, okay, we'll put a deck together, put a product sample together, whatever, and try to get the next round of investment. And sooner or later you end up in a situation where you don't really have much. You have kind of vaporware, but there is still a lot of investor demand. So you have a company that could be valued at however many hundred millions or billions of dollars, but there's not really that much behind it. So there have been some that I've been kind of I think I've been fairly closely I've seen a number of those just to one extent or another, and not to a Theranos degree, but you kind of see that dynamic at play, or at least you did in the tech industry in China during those years.
Would you say, at least on the U.S. stock market, are Chinese companies given kind of a pass when it comes to auditing or transparency?
Yeah. Like it doesn't, there is no, I haven't met a single person that actually thinks that it is legally a good thing for Chinese companies to be listed on U.S. exchanges this way. There are a lot of folks who think that it is maybe in their interests because they want to get, a piece of these companies, or there are folks that think, okay, well, having these financial ties between China and the U.S. is helpful. Then there are people who, in China, I think more so want to be able to tap U.S. markets. But the reality of the situation and the incentives that are involved are completely out of whack, and I think just about any objective observer will say that. So the way that these companies are structured is that if you're buying, for example, Alibaba stock on a U.S. stock exchange, you are not actually buying a share of Alibaba. You are buying a piece of a company, of an offshore listed company or an offshore established company that has a right to a percentage of Alibaba's profits. Now, Alibaba itself is not under a legal obligation in China to report their accurate financials, or none of these Chinese companies are. It is not illegal to defraud a foreigner in China, really. And then I think in addition to that, there are all sorts of other kind of incentives that are in place where even if an entrepreneur is a person of integrity and they want to do the right thing, every entrepreneur and every individual weighs out risk and reward, right? It is just what you do, as a person and as a business person. And the way that the incentives are set up right now is that there is far more reward to falsify your numbers and to be fraudulent than there is risk to being caught, from what I can ascertain. I think that I don't know how well listeners will follow, for example, the case of Luck and Coffee, which was a Chinese kind of coffee chain that ended up admitting fraud and kind of going, I guess not entirely belly up, but kind of having a lot of problems earlier this year. The big issue there was COVID. That COVID, they had been committing fraud, but because of COVID, they didn't have the kind of cash flow that they would have needed to be able to cover up their fraud, right? And then they admitted their fraud, right? And then the Chinese government cracked down on them. The Chinese regulators cracked down on them. The two lessons there that I think a lot of business people or entrepreneurs in China will take from it is not don't commit fraud. It is, if you commit fraud and you have this black swan event like like COVID, where you can't have the cash flow that you need to cover it up, or then that's a problem. Or the other side of it is don't admit the fraud, because they admitted the fraud, and that gave Chinese regulators a reason to crack down on them. So the incentives that are there are not ones that would encourage good behavior, I think, from these companies. However, I still own shares of some of these U.S. listed Chinese companies because some of them I think are good companies. What I will say is, I tell a lot of folks this, is that there are companies, just about all of them I would expect to be fraudulent. I don't know if they are fraudulent. I would expect them to be fraudulent. I don't expect all of them to be frauds, meaning that their business is a fraud. Some of them are frauds. A good business that is in some ways fraudulent is not entirely a bad investment, especially if you're looking for growth and you're well balanced. So that's my take on that.
Well, the biggest fraud about Luckin Coffee is that you need a stupid app to order a coffee in their shop. Like, you're in the brick and mortar, and they're like, sorry, do you have the app? I'm afraid you can't order from us if you don't have the app. You're going to have to go back to your Wi-Fi and download that.
From.
Yeah, I know, but they opened one in my old office that was in Shanghai in Hongkou district. And I go in there and they're like, sorry, you're going to need to get the app to order here. I'm like, I told them to get fucked. I was like, I'm leaving. I don't want to have to go to a shop and use an app to buy your product when I have cash in my pocket. I know cash is passé in China, but I still carry it, and I want to use it. How do you feel about all that?
Or I just want to, can't you have a mini program on WeChat and just scan the WeChat too? Like, the downloading of the app is a huge pain in the ass.
Yeah, well, that would still piss me off. That would still piss me off, but it would be a good compromise.
No.
Yeah.
That was the whole that they have that data, and that they can, by having all that customer data, they can kind of optimize where they are putting their stores, but then two, how they market so how do you put an advertisement to people within certain locations?
Mm-hmm.
How do you expect certain foot traffic, or certain how do you expect the inventory? There's tons of stuff that you or anticipate inventory. There's tons of stuff that you can do with that I think investors were enticed by. Also, you can basically turn that into a 7-Eleven if you want to. That's the whole idea. So, okay, well, if we have everybody on our app anyway, then all right, well, let's sell toilet paper there. Let's sell beer there. Let's sell whatever, because that was what they had been talking about. In that, if they have an app, if they have all these users, and they can, because they're on the app, then they can essentially monetize the data. They can also offer better value, better savings for their users, and kind of keep that cash flow moving through the company. And a big cash flow moving through the company also means that you can do any number of ways to securitize that cash flow or borrow off of that cash flow, and or commit fraud that is covered up by that cash flow. And that's kind of what ended up happening.
Okay, so you mentioned some nicer companies that actually you like to invest in. What are some of those, and why?
Well, I don't want to say that just plug them, because it's I can't get behind any of these entirely.
Okay.
It's investing involves risk. One of the ones that I've really liked is Bilibili, which is kind of been called China's YouTube. It's I guess it's a streaming platform, but it's also a gaming platform. It kind of grew by being really hot within the niche of people that are into manga and anime type stuff. Really with the young population in China, and it has expanded really well. And it has been, I bought a good amount of shares probably last year at some point, like late last year, and they've had a fantastic 2020. I'm super happy with them. I don't know where they're going to go from here, but they have been, in accordance with they have done much better than my expectations. But I think that they're a great company in that they built a very, very strong, high value, young, high quality user core, and then kind of expanded out from there in a way that I think you see most great social platforms and video platforms doing. So that's a company that I'm really happy with and really like. Another one that I've been impressed with this year, and one that I own shares in, is Xiaomi. So, this is less. Part of it is because I think that they're a great company, but it's less because they're just a great company. It's also because of what the U.S. government has been doing with Huawei, right? Where Huawei has had a very large market share of the market of smartphones around the world, particularly in places like Europe, where comparatively the users have more money to spend, or consumers have more money to spend, so they can buy higher value phones, and also they can be advertised to they're a more lucrative advertising market. What has happened since the U.S. put sanctions on Huawei is that Huawei hasn't been able to produce as many smartphones, so they've been having to withdraw from some of these markets, these international markets. So Xiaomi sees an opportunity, and Xiaomi has gone into Europe, and their smartphone shipments have surged. Another thing that's great with them is that they are really getting into the kind of Internet of Things, the IoT device market around the world, but particularly in high growth places, like, for example, Southeast Asia. I just bought an air purifier because the air in Bangkok is looking more and more like the air in Beijing when I was there. And just looking through the big e-commerce platform here, there was really no reason to buy anything but the Xiaomi, because they're a decent enough quality, and they're going to be a better price than a lot of their competition. So for those, they also have, I think, a very good eye, like a very strategic eye on how to kind of merge kind of the analytics and the data that they are collecting from all these devices. And for those reasons, I like them as a company. But I still am, I bought a Huawei or Xiaomi air purifier, but I bought one reluctantly because, when any company's business model is kind of built around what they're going to do with your data that way, that is something that also doesn't make me very comfortable. But anyways, those are a couple companies that I like.
They know you like clean air, Elliott. They're getting closer to the truth.
Yes.
Yeah, I had a Xiaomi air purifier in Shanghai. Yeah, they're pretty decent. And very cheap.
Yeah. Well,
for the quality that you get, it's pretty cheap.
Well, did you ever have something like a Blue Air? Like I had a Blue Air that I paid hundreds and hundreds of dollars for. But what is an air purifier? It's a HEPA filter and a fan.
Yeah. And then some of those expensive...
It's something that
Sorry, I was saying, some of those expensive air filters, they make you buy those replacements. And they make those super expensive. They're like 500 RMB per filter. Yeah.
And I think that's actually that's a very good microcosm for, I think, the broader dynamics that some of these Chinese companies are capitalized on. In that a lot of them have been able to see, okay, because all this stuff is made in China anyway, they can say, okay, well, this is how much it costs for this, how much it costs for that, how much it costs for that, and then it's being sold for this, but we know everything that goes into it, because everything that goes into it is right next to us. It's right over there down the street. We're in Shenzhen, right? And so I think the smartphones is the same way. It's like, why is an iPhone being sold that much when we can, make essentially the same product for a fraction of the cost? That has been, I think, a phenomenon that has driven a lot of these Chinese companies is that they're able to produce value for money because they kind of know what goes into it. They can hit scale within the Chinese market so that they have some sort of kind of buffer and reason for investment and kind of cash flow. And then they can go abroad.
They even made a whole brand that just sounds like a baby saying Apple, Oppo.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's your take on some of these smartphone companies? Huawei was banned from a lot of countries. Xiaomi was not. And then there's other companies like Vivo and Oppo and OnePlus. And there's more, like Xiaomi. There's a lot that are only sold abroad. They're not even sold in China, like the TechNode phone.
Do you hear what happened with Xiaomi? Like, their founder claimed to have, like, gambled away a bunch of the money of the company. Anyways, that's another thing. People can search that up.
That sounds amazing.
The difference between Xiaomi and Huawei, or Oppo, Vivo, and Huawei, is that, yes, Huawei makes smartphones. Huawei also makes network equipment, and infrastructure equipment. So Huawei, also because they had the scale, the cash flow, the loans, the subsidies, all of those things, they were able to essentially, if you're a country and you're trying to, or telecoms, like a usually often state, at least somewhat state owned or whatnot, within a country. And you're trying to build out, for example, your 5G network, what you're going to do is you're going to get bids from, Huawei, Ericsson, Nokia, etc. And those are the guys that are going to build the fiber optic cable. They're going to build those cell phone towers. That's what they're going to build, right? So they're the ones that are going to supply you with the actual internet. Now, in a lot of these cases, Huawei could outbid the competition. And if you're going for the best quality, the lowest price, you go with Huawei because that's where it makes sense, often because of things like scale, subsidies, etc. It's a complicated soup. It's not just about Chinese government support, but it's a lot about Chinese government support. But what that ends up happening is that you have the entire network of countries that are reliant upon Huawei. And then if you are, the argument from the United States was that, that then they could spy on whatever they want. They could spy on sensitive information. And that is true. The U.S. also spies on sensitive information, but, but that's also where that, the military alliance aspect, comes into play, right? So if you're Australia, and you have your security guaranteed by the U.S. military, you don't want to have a U.S. adversary building your networks. Mm-hmm. That's the situation.
Seems reasonable.
But when it comes to just your handset, they can potentially collect a good amount of individual information, but it's not the same thing as core infrastructure that if it went offline could completely shut down a country. And that's what the whole Huawei debate was about. Now, what ended up happening with Huawei is that you had, I don't know how much your listeners are going to be interested in this, but you had starting late 2018, you had the U.S. government really pushing its allies around the world to essentially ban Huawei from its 5G rollout. And they had some success, but they were not having a whole lot of success in doing that because of the pushback from the telecoms companies. And also because there was not a whole lot of evidence of Huawei being used in that way. There were some, but not tons. Even though, potentially they very well could. And that's where I think the best argument is. But then the other side of that is that the U.S. at the same time started hitting Huawei with sanctions to their supply chain. So a lot of their chips would either come from the U.S. or come from U.S. companies, right? A lot of this kind of core tech infrastructure would come from the U.S. So they said, okay, we're just going to cut you off from that. So without that kind of core tech, the chips and things like that, they can't hit that same kind of scale, and they can't hit that same kind of quality. So without being able to do that, then they actually can't build out in Europe the way that they want to. So what has happened now is that the U.S. has won essentially, but not because I think partly because they've convinced their allies that this is a security threat. But the other side of it is that that Huawei can't deliver anyway, because the U.S. has cut them off from their side of the supply chain.
So they've won the battle, I would say. So China's working on developing its own chip technology. How would you say that's going? How would you say the chip development in China? You don't know?
It's hard to say. Like, I mean, you can talk to somebody who really follows it more closely than I do. I don't think that the big issue right now, and I think where the real flashpoint is that the company that is the leader in chip technology, I think kind of unequivocally, is Taiwan Semiconductor. Which, I mean, if you're China, Taiwan is part of China.
Oh, of course.
And they're itching to retake Taiwan, right? And that's kind of if you want to compare it to past conflicts, for example, like World War II, right? A lot of, for example, Japan's moves militarily were to access oil. You could say that potentially, if the U.S. and China are to get into a greater conflict, and God forbid, that one of those flashpoints is that China needs the tech, and they need those chips, and Taiwan has the chips. So that's a major flashpoint, a major a potential. I don't know what the right word is, but something that I'd be worried about.
Well, communists, they do like to seize the means of production.
Yeah, it's. I mean, that's a whole other road to go down. But yeah.
So we've talked a lot about China. I'm just going to pull up your Twitter here. So I would say you're part of China Twitter. Have you ever made a list, like the top 20 China Twitter accounts to follow? Number 16, Elliott Zaagman.
Sup China made one a few years ago, and I was on the list. And then a couple other people make people with Substacks will make these are the China Twitter people to follow and things like that. But I'm not. I'd say I'm junior. I'm junior China Twitter. I'm I'm not. I don't work for a big news outlet. I'm not like Bill Bishop, who's whispering in Matt Pottinger's ear or anything like that. Those are the people who I think have the real influence. I have 10,000 followers, something like that, and just kind of. I don't. I had somebody try to criticize me. I will not say this person's name. But they said, you must be not, you are, if you believe that, you are not a serious person. But I think I felt kind of odd about that, because why should I be a serious person? What?
Yeah, you're not technically a journalist, right?
Huh?
You're not technically a journalist, right?
Exactly. So what I try to do is I don't, but also I don't I don't want to spread incorrect information, and I want to be a person of integrity, but I'm not looking to be a I don't have the same kind of I'm not looking to be someone like Bill Bishop, or I'm perfectly happy half of my tweets being jokes and and things like that, and and then some information that can be valuable, if I think if it's worth sharing, right? But I don't have the aspiration to be I fucking hate I've had a couple of times where you get in these Twitter fights, or where we're
oh yeah, I watch them. I'm a spectator of those.
Yeah. like you're like maybe like you criticize somebody or say something that's not like that. Like I would think is often not that like, or just say like, well, why is like just ask a question or like, or just say like, at times saying like, like, well, it, you say this, but then you also say this. Maybe trying to target somebody, uh, but not in a way that I think is particularly mean. But then you get into this whole spat where like you're being accused of things and like that's not what I'm trying to trying to say. And I think that there's also like a lot of people out there who like, they don't want to actually have a conversation. They want to like dunk on you, right? So like
Yeah.
you're trying to like, so well, the way that one thing that I noticed is like, if someone replies to a reply of a good faith question, then often I think that they probably want to have a real conversation. If someone is retweeting it with something that is a sassy kind of like, just, I don't know, shit post, like I like that. It just doesn't make me feel good. Also, like why would I want to, like, when that has happened, it's like a day or two where it's just kind of like in the back of my mind, and I'm just like, oh man, I liked that person. Like, what? Never like that. Like, it just like I fucking hate that shit. Like, and so
Yeah.
much of China Twitter, I think, is that. And like, obviously, like I'm not entirely innocent either, but um, like it just feels so unproductive, and it just like it hurts after a while, and it's like so lately I just kind of like I'll be like, okay, well I'm gonna try to spend more time off it, or like I'm just gonna tweet about platypuses, or something like that, where like just like it just can be like just such a, a ruiner of my day, I think.
Let's take a
And
step back.
yeah,
Can you explain what is China Twitter? Because you talked a lot about it, but for anybody listening, they might like, what is this guy talking about? Who are these people? Who's Bill Bishop?
well, oh yeah. So I think it's like anyone who tweets about China, pretty much, like is in a
Okay.
conversation. So China Twitter includes, I'd say, so like Bill Bishop runs a cynicism newsletter, but based in DC. He's a very influential person. He's also an angel investor. Like he's done very well for himself. He's incredibly influential. He has hundreds of thousands of followers, and also he has an ear of a lot of the kind of more influential people in Washington D.C. Um, but then, so I'd say like he's kind of one of the top dogs. But then you also have, I mean, you just have like the journalists at a lot of like the China focused outlets, whether it's like Sub China or like TechNode, for example, or like David Barboza, the Wired China. You have a lot of these kind of China focused outlets, and then you also have China journalists at places like New York Times, Washington Post, uh, whatnot. And then you also have, people who've lived in China, people who are Chinese. You have Chinese state media voices who are often not that great. Um, and the other side of that is you often have, you have people who are kind of national security hawks in DC who don't know that much about what they're talking about either. Then you have the people who are kind of spectators around that. And I guess would that be a good way to describe it? It's just kind of the entire kind of community around the topic of China on Twitter. And I think that what has happened as kind of U.S.-China tensions have grown is that there have just been a lot more folks in that space, right? When the Hong Kong protests were kind of really raring up, there was a kind of flood into there as well. And then also, I think just people get a lot more emotional and a lot more, they're just a lot more tied into it that people have. So it's a place where, like sometimes there's really good and interesting stuff, but like it often is can be a pretty nasty place.
Yeah, and
I'd
I
say,
like how
because
it's
I think
all
there's
these lofty institutions, really serious people, but the underlying theme is that there's schoolgirl drama between all
yeah,
of them. Well, maybe
yeah.
not all of them. There's a lot of reasonable people in there who don't engage in those kind of fights and whatnot.
Yeah, and I think there's just a lot of like I think Twitter, if you spend too much time on it, like you just get drawn into that stuff, And I think also there's a cycle of spending a lot of time on Twitter also makes you more angry and depressed
Yeah.
because Twitter is an engine for anger and grief. And so what you're going to do is you're going to, kind of churn that out. And also, so we've had the pandemic, so people are inside more. People are not, probably aren't feeling that great. Maybe they're making as much money as they did before, have financial issues. And then also, I think that a lot of the people that are on it have a foot in both in one world and another. So whether that be they're an entrepreneur, a business person who maybe they're from the U.S. or Australia or Europe, whatnot, and then they do business in China, or they're originally from China and then they study or work in the U.S. or whatnot, is that the deterioration of U.S.-China ties, I think, very directly impacts their livelihood and their life. So I think it hits people really, really hard, and it hits people in a way that is very different for everyone. So it's very hard to anticipate, I think, how people are going to be maybe sensitive about a certain issue or a certain way that something is framed. So, and 280 characters are not a great way to express like a sort of nuanced disagreement or to actually try to listen to somebody's experience. So I think and then there are also incentives to really fighting and to blowing that shit up because you get more followers. And if you want to get a bunch of followers because you want to boost your career, then that helps. So, and then you have things like fucking like the Chinese government with their troll farms, right? So, and they're going to be boosting stuff too. So, and there's just all sorts of factors involved.
How about the actual Chinese diplomats or government characters that are on there who are calling people bitches and stuff like that?
Well, that's another thing, and I think that is so wolf warrior diplomacy, kind of the term that it's used, based on this kind of Rambo-like movie that came out in China. That's very kind of patriotic and aggressively patriotic. But I think that one thing that I don't think it gets enough discussion when we talk about China today is I think that the way that Xi Jinping and a lot of the people in power right now seem to have made a determination that the way in which they can best either implement their agenda or stay in power is to make sure that the hardliners and the nationalists are on their side, and that is the cohort that they cannot upset, and that if they expand it, it's also good for them. So what that leads to is a feeding of that sentiment, I think, and you get overseas. It makes in the same way that, for example, when Trump would say these very brash and offensive and often unproductive things, right? It's not going to help if you're insulting Democrats or insulting Angela Merkel or whatnot. It's not going to help you actually make a deal on legislation or make a deal, a trade deal with Europe. But it will make your fans happy. And I think that we're seeing the same thing in China right now, where you have some of these diplomats or some of these state media personalities. It's both. I mean, the diplomats are awful often, who just will say very brash and kind of often offensive or really upsetting things, and which hurts China diplomatically, but it kind of emboldens their nationalists at home, and that at least keeps them in power at home. But it's a vicious cycle that is not going to end up in a good place, I don't think.
We've talked a lot about China and kind of the nitty-gritty about China Twitter and some of the tech companies. Let's talk about some of the other places you lived. So how many countries have you lived in outside of the U.S.?
So lived in, I'd say probably. So I was in Costa Rica for 6 months. So I don't know if that counts.
That
But
counts.
yeah, so I got married there. I worked there for a while and got married there. And then and now I've lived in Thailand for about 3 years. I'm based here. We'll be back in China. Used to be back in China a lot more, but now because of COVID, just here. So yeah, three countries outside of the U.S. really.
All right, so that means it's time for the big announcement. Elliott Zaagman. So you get 3 Mr. Worldwides.
Okay.
So everybody on the
All
show, you got to have at least one Mr. Worldwide to get on the show. That means you lived in 1 foreign country. 5 means you lived in 5 foreign countries. And then 6, you still get 5.
I like that drop. That drop is great.
Oh, yeah, it's that Jennifer Lopez on the floor featuring Pitbull, Mr. Worldwide.
Yeah, that was what is it? What was it? The Big Mouth. You ever watch that on Netflix?
I've not watched it. I know of it though. Yeah.
It's good, but so one of the characters, they have a pit bull, and he goes, and the name of the pit bull is featuring Ludacris. So he goes, "It's my pit bull featuring Ludacris."
That's great.
It's a stupid joke, but I love it every time.
Yeah, that song. I used to live in Nanchang, and I think it came out in like 2010. That was a big club banger there in Nanchang. Of course, the clubs in Nanchang, they didn't have dance floors. They were all tables and stages.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, I wouldn't imagine that the clubs in Nanchang would be that great.
Well, I had a great time, but it was more about the people I was with, how the fake booze made me feel. It was pretty, it was wild, it was exciting, it was new, but definitely different. It's weird when you're in a club when they're playing music, you should dance, but there's no dance floor, and the tables are all packed. Does that mean we're going to talk since there's all tables? But I can't hear you because the music's too loud, so we're just going to play dice.
Always the dice game, man. It's always the dice game. Yeah. So and that's like, but you have that's what I would notice. Like when I was there in like 2008, right out of school, that's when we'd actually go to the club. But that was always the thing. It's like, hey, you go to Shanghai, you go to Beijing, and people actually dance. But outside, it's like, it's that kind of thing. It's like, there's music, and there's like, in a lot of places there's dance floor, but no one's dancing. They're playing fucking dice. It's like, okay, what's going on? Anyways.
How about Thailand though? How would you say the nightlife is there? I know there's all the sex tourism stereotypes, but tell us your perspective of what Thailand's really all about.
Well, this is actually very interesting, and I think it's often a misconception, right? Because I'm here with my wife. Like, I don't go out really on weekends much. I'm pretty much a homebody. I early to bed, early to rise. Like, I'm the most boring person you're gonna meet. So like people be like, "Oh, you live in Thailand, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Like, anyway, no, but it's like you can have you can have whatever kind of night you want. But one thing I think is a misconception is how party, like sex tourism, all that shit. This country is like focused on. I think Thailand does a pretty good job of like kind of keeping that stuff in where it is and not having it where it's not. So like, for example, like when I lived in Beijing, like every neighborhood had a place that was pretty clearly like, oh, that's a prostitute. Like it was pretty evident, and it was just kind of all around the city.
What gave it away? The pink lights with the 16 women sitting inside? Yeah.
That kind of thing, right? So where I live, in Bangkok. I don't see it anywhere around me. Where if you go down to Sukhumvit, which is like where kind of a lot of the tourist area is, then that's there. So there's just a bunch of clubs, like there's like that kind of massage place, that kind of karaoke place. But like where in my neighborhood, I love my neighborhood. But it's like there's none of that at all. and it's pleasant. But also, yeah, and where I hardly ever encounter that. So let's say we want to go to the beach on the weekend. Okay, well, we're going to go to the nearby town or down to Phuket or something. And if you want to, there's that district. But if you don't want to go to that district, you don't even notice it. And I kind of like that. That it's something that it's Thailand's kind of known for. But if you don't, it's weird for me to think that when people think about that, because I don't think about it because I've lived here and it's like I don't even see it anywhere. And I saw it more in China. So that's one thing that I think is kind of interesting, is that it's kind of the reputation that it has is not kind of how it feels when you're actually living here. But when it comes to the nightlife here, one thing I do notice is you got in my neighborhood, there's tons of good cocktail bars and everything, but that's kind of as an old man, that's my thing. But also, yeah, there are good clubs and bars, and there's, we just had a COVID outbreak again, but for the most part, there hasn't been much. And yeah, there's if you want to party, you party. But unfortunately, I guess, I don't know if I want to use unfortunately, it's I don't really have, my whole thinking is well, why would I go out that late at night? When I can be in bed by 11. That's kind of my take on it, I guess. But yeah, that's but it's fun, especially when all the tourists are here. There's a lot of fun that you can do. There was a lot of actually the old Chinese China expat scene kind of is down here. A lot of folks that I knew from China moved down here, and you meet up with them, and then a lot of times they'll know better places than I did. So the other night I met with or a couple months ago, I guess, I met with a buddy of mine who I knew from China, and he was like, "Oh, you want to go axe throwing?" And I was like, "Axe throwing? What are you talking about?" And you go to a place where they give you these hatchets, and you just fucking chuck an axe against the wall, and there's a target, and you're throwing axes against the wall.
Yeah, that's very popular in America right now. It's pretty hot here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think I think it probably started here. I think as a trend for team building exercises and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So, yeah, combining alcohol with axe throwing. It sounds like a terrible idea, but it seems to work.
No, it's so much fun though. Super fun. Yeah. So, anyways, I guess it's not. Maybe this is my old man talking there, where I think it's a new idea. Anyways, yeah.
Well, how would you describe Thailand to somebody who's never been? Somebody from outside Thailand who's never been there before.
Yeah, that's So, like I said before, I think it has a lot of that reputation, and it's if you're looking for that, then you can find that here. But it's not, like I said, I think for most average Thai people and for most people that live here, it's not a party place. It's not a sex place. I'm gonna go grab a beer.
Okay.
It's just kind of it's a fucking great place to live. The way that I just say is if I don't have to leave, I'm not gonna leave. So if there's not a family health situation, if there's not a job change or something like that, why leave? So it's affordable, at least in this situation. Both my wife and I have incomes that are kind of comparable to the United States or wherever else we'd be, and things are very affordable. The service is very good. People are very nice. It's a fantastic lifestyle. It's warm all the time. Sometimes it's polluted, but sometimes it's a little, the beaches can be a little dirty sometimes if you're if you go to the wrong one. But at least as far as I'm concerned, I can't really complain about this place at all. I love it here. It's nice. It's sunny. It's do you want to hear what my schedule is like on one of the days?
Yeah.
Here's what I do.
Let's hear it.
I get up in the morning. Sometimes I'll have work around town. I'll do a little consulting and freelancing around town. But usually I'll maybe work in the morning. Usually while I work, I'll have like whatever sports from the U.S. is on in the morning, right? Maybe have a call or something. Middle of the day, I go to the gym and try to do like an hour and a half at the gym. Come back, work some more, right? If it's like after 4, if I don't have any work to do, I will go to the pool and kind of exercise more. If I do have work to do, I'll still go to the pool and just sit on the side of the pool and work from my phone. And then like I'll, in the evening, maybe we'll have dinner with some friends, maybe have a little more work to do. Maybe watch something on the TV with my wife, have dinner, right? And then go to bed. I can't really complain about any of that. Like, it's a pretty chill life. I mean, part of it is like working remotely, but it's just, like you get to go to the pool every day. Like I work out every day. I can't really, it's easier to save money, and it's pretty great. Like I can't really complain about anything. And like it kind of sucks to be away from family, but I've been away from family as an expat for a decade or more. So eventually probably gotta go back home, but as long as this is the life, then I'll live this life.
You ever buy Bitcoin sitting by the pool?
Bitcoin, no, I probably should have. I've gotten paid for some projects I've done in cryptocurrency. And like I don't really know what to do with that. Like I mean it's gone up, but yeah, I'm not are you into Bitcoin?
I'm not like a Bitcoin guy, but I did buy some this year, and it was a really good decision because it's gone up a lot since I bought it.
It's gone
like
crazy.
More than doubled in value of what I bought, so it's going good. I'll probably buy more when it dips.
Yeah,
again.
I probably should have. I've always thought like, yeah, maybe I should get into it, but like I just haven't.
And then all these people get rich just sitting there.
It's the same thing with like Tesla, man. Like it's like, yeah, it's going crazy, and the more kind of cash that's in the economy, the more people buy it. But it's also something that I don't feel comfortable buying too much of. So like I hold Tesla shares, but I don't hold a ton. I probably should have held more. I should have bought more. But there are. I don't feel comfortable with, because there's just so much speculative energy in there. Like it just makes me feel awkward. But I guess considering my age, it's always one of those things where considering my age, I probably should just go more in. But maybe I will. But we'll see.
So your life is very peaceful, calm, relaxed. There's a lot of expats who don't live that way. And do you have any stories you could share? Because one of the things I love about being an expat is all the weird people I meet who are also expats. Do you have any stories about weirdos you met in China, Thailand, or Costa Rica, or anywhere else?
I don't know if I want to say weirdos, because there are weirdos that are like, man, I don't want to deal with this guy. Like, where you're like, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, oh, it's like this guy has, this guy is like some British dude who after the girl walks away, he's like, clever girl. Like, you can tell this guy's like just like dripping with creepiness, and he's just like maybe doesn't clip his fingernails enough. Like, you know what I'm talking about?
Or his fingernails a little yellow as well.
Yeah. So there are, and the weirdest expats I don't want to hang out with. And also, in addition to that, I think of the term expat. I think I'm always a little. I think about that. I'm like, okay, what separates an expat from a migrant worker? It's like it's usually the status of the country you come from, right?
Well, if you're a legal migrant and you're gonna go back home, you're an expat. Yeah.
But I have many times been an illegal migrant, especially earlier in my life. So would I have been an expat at that point? I don't know. So I'll give you a couple people, and these are people who I would just say are like I've had the privilege to know. So one of them I think is so when I went to the first time I ever came to China, 2008, I came as an English teacher in Beijing, like a week before the Olympics, and it's so and just didn't know anything. I went with a program and where they basically pop you in a language mill and they don't pay you very much, and they just work you, but they give you enough of a stipend, they give you a little house, a little apartment, and you can have fun because there's all these other teachers there. Anyways, one of those teachers was a guy who ended up staying there for almost a decade. His name was Josh Kartzman, so if anyone knows Josh Kartzman. But Josh Kartzman was like my favorite person, my favorite expat who I've ever met in China. But he's just like he's just like the nicest guy. Like, and he just like, so he was just like kind of hard drinking, but still like get up every morning, go to work. From I think North Carolina, like just great at conversation. Like just like great to like throw back beers with. We'd always go to shabu shabu in China and Beijing, like which is like this cheap hot pot place, and we just eat so much and just throw back a bunch of beers, and it would always be like he'd always just be so good at like just these random questions, like okay, like like who would win in a fight, like a fucking blue whale or a God. Well, I don't know. It's just like bullshit like that.
You sound like my 6-year-old son.
But just like a nice, but just like a super like fun, jovial guy, like always up for a good time. But also, he ended up being a teacher there for a long time, and he was somebody who was just like meant to be a teacher.
Yeah.
Like in China, and just like he didn't have a teaching degree. He wasn't the kind of person who like wanted to. I mean, he got like a CELTA, like an English teaching degree, like a certificate. But he wasn't the kind of person who's like, just go like real career oriented. But he ended up working for EF, and he would go in and he would he ran their life club, which is like, okay, this week we're gonna bring a bunch of people, we're gonna go play laser tag, or this week a bunch of the students we're gonna go do an escape room or something. And he would run that shit, and he was so incredibly popular. For good reason. He was just like gifted at that. Like he was just gifted at like getting people to have a good time, getting people to talk, getting people to learn. And like you can't be around him without just smiling. And he ended up leaving. He's not there anymore. So I saw him back in the States a while back. But like it's just one of those people where you're like, oh, this guy is made to be in China right now. And like that, just kind of seeing him kind of do what he did there was always such a joy to me, and kind of hanging out with him. He's still one of my best friends, and just such a great guy. So that's one. Number two, I think is another, and this is not, once again, not a kind of weird, crazy expat, but like I said, there are career-wise, there are some like opportunities that I've been able to get as being an expat. But there's also people you meet that like are like, what the fuck is this person doing hanging out with me? So, so two of the people that I would put in that category are Marcus and Hannah Ryder. I don't know if listeners would know this person or these people. They're Marcus. They were in Beijing for a long time. Marcus, they're a British couple. Marcus was like a BBC bureau chief for a long time. Worked for CGTN and Caixin in China. Hannah worked for the British government and for the UN, which is how I ended up meeting her. And then also she runs a think tank now, Development Reimagined, that focuses often on China, Africa ties. But these people are just like, they're just so incredibly accomplished, and just they run marathons, and they have a child, and they just like get so much done. Marcus recently got a member of the British Empire from the Queen, like just these like, and they get on, just they get these recognition from these like celebrities or these people who are I would just put it in a whole different stratosphere for me. But they're some of my best friends, and I lived with them often when I was in China, when I was kind of based down here, but still going back. They've stayed with us down here for a while. But yeah, like there are these people that are just like, it's like, how did these brilliant, just like accomplished, incredible people end up in my life? And one of the big reasons is like just that we're in the same expat community. So that's just, I think, what I would consider to be an absolute blessing. But to something that is, I think, a little weird again. One person that I know, I don't want to say too much information, but I did meet a person in China who is an ayahuasca shaman. An expat in China who's an ayahuasca shaman. So, are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
So, I don't want to give up too much information. But he's like a professional facilitator.
Yeah, so, for anyone who doesn't know, ayahuasca is a psychedelic drug, and it's used, I guess you could say, medicinally in some parts of the Amazon.
Yeah. But it's it's like, if you've done mushrooms or acid or whatnot, like, it's something that, you do for fun. You don't do this drug for fun. It's something that is kind of way more intense. It often is negative. It can be difficult to throw up. But it can be quite therapeutic, I think, for people that maybe have to deal with, some psychological trauma or things like that. So it requires, I think, very sophisticated facilitation. But I met an individual, an expat, who would run these facilitations, and very professionally, very well done. Won't say if I did it or not, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you're like, whoa, this is your job, huh? And I took it very seriously, and I also know a lot of people who have really kind of benefited from that. It's certainly, I don't think, something for everyone, but I think for some people, I just I think that he's a very, I think, mindful and very professional individual who I think he's benefited and impacted a lot of people's lives positively.
Yeah, the China expat scene seems very entrepreneurial to me. There's somebody doing everything over there, even ayahuasca ceremonies.
Yeah, I mean, it's scary. I'd be scared, like, just considering how, like, they're not going to understand that in China. They're not going to be like, oh, well, this is some sort of, medicinal. But I guess, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll take it easy on him. He's a shaman.
Yeah, I'd be fucking terrified. So, like, especially nowadays in China, like, any of that stuff, like.
Yeah, especially nowadays. We talked about this a bit in the last episode about a lot of the drug crackdowns. We don't have to get too into it this time. We've been recording for about an hour and 18 minutes. I think we can wrap it up. Is there anything you want to plug? Do you want to promote your podcast or anything else?
Yeah, sure. China Tech Investor Podcast. So you can just search China Tech Investor wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever. Yeah, just if you're interested in investing in Chinese tech companies, go ahead and subscribe. But yeah, you can also follow me on Twitter at Elliott Zaagman. That's at ELLIOTTZAAGMAN. And feel free to give me a DM or something like that. I'll try to respond if you're nice.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Sure, man. It was good to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. All right.
Yeah, especially when I'm doing all the talking. All right. Nothing against you talking, but.
Well, you're the guest.
It's always.
Yeah, people are here to listen
to you. It's
to
nice to be the guest, is what I'm saying.
I'm just here to facilitate. All right. Thanks for watching. Take care.